Brilliant. Okay. Very good.
I never, what happened is I qualified to be a pilot training, which is what I wanted, and also I passed the bombardier, to be a bombardier, so you go to be a bombardier school. So what happened, I was signed to Albany, Georgia, Dar Tech, and the way they trained you those times is they got all kinds of civilian pilots and all kinds of people that went through the Air Force training, and the very best pilots, they kept them as instructors. I happened to get a civilian instructor. Each instructor was given 10 students to train. And what you did, and it was 12 weeks at each school, you had to get 60 hours of flight training before you go to another school. So what happened is every instructor then was given 10 students, and what he would do, he would fly half a day with 5 of the students, and then the other half of the day take the other 5, you see, to train the 10 students. So the class I was in had 5 students in it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I'd never flown an airplane in my life. Never. We have one guy that had pilot training, and he was in. So we started flying, and we flew the Stearman, the PT-19s, the most difficult airplane to fly that anybody ever flew. Simply because it was a ground looper, it was very difficult. And the reason they done that, if you could fly that, you could fly any damn thing, see? It got rid of the people couldn't fly. So, and what you had to do, you could not solo until you had 8 hours, but you had to solo before you got 12 hours, see? And each school then was 60 hours of training. So what happened is this pilot I got was a guy from New York, a little short guy, and I forget his name, I could look it up, but anyhow, he was a good pilot, and he had these 5 students. The first fellow that washed out was the guy that had pilot training, previous pilot training. He lost out first. So as we got up, it was one morning I went out after a lot of training with him of flying the airplane and making hundreds of landings and all this stuff. One morning we got up and I reported in to him, and he says, okay, he says, we're going out and shoot landings today. So I says, yes, sir, because in the Air Force you said, yes, sir, no, excuse, sir, nothing else. And that is excellent training for any person that ought to have. I'm a person that thinks that every person ought to be made to go into the damn military and learn how to do things. And so one morning, I had about 7 3/4 hours of training. Now, they're not allowed to solo you until you get 8 hours. They're not allowed to do it, and they got to solo you by 12 hours. So we went out and shot 3 landings. He crawled out of that airplane, and of course he sat in the front seat. I sat in the back seat, and the way he communicated is through a tube to your ears. And if he wanted to talk to you, he'd pat himself in the head, and I'd say, yes, sir, you know. And he says, okay. He says, let's get out of the airplane. And this is what this guy said to me. I had 7 3/4 hours. He says, damn you, he says, maybe you're going to kill yourself, but you aren't going to kill me. I thought, this is the end of my flying skill, you know? I felt terrible. Talked a little bit on it. He says, you get your ass back on that airplane. He says, and don't you dare land that until you got 45 more minutes or 8 hours, what it was. And I said, now get going, see? And what they try to do, the whole training is very nasty with you, because when you fly an airplane, you've got to make decisions. You can't get upset about things. This was part of it. Well, I thought I was done because I had no idea, you know. I was the first person to solo of our group. The other guy that had previous pilot training, they wouldn't even let him solo. And they know who can fly, because they claim if you can fly that airplane, you can fly anything. The military had it then. Everything else then is to get into larger trainers, and then you learn to use them as weapons. So I soloed, and I was the first one. And the last guy to solo, he knew he could fly, but he got up to about 11 and a half hours, and he sent him up in the air. And when the guy gets out of the front seat, you've got a different airplane because all the weight's in the front seat, and you're in the back seat. You fly in the back seat, so you've got different airplane. You've got to learn to fly differently, and it's very difficult to land. It was a ground loopness airplane you ever saw. It wanted to go off. So what happened? This other guy had up maybe 11 and a half hours when he took, or no. Well, the point is, he had to solo before 12 hours or be washed out. So he sent him up one day. This guy tried 5-6 times to get the airplane down. He couldn't get it down on the ground. And finally, on the last round, before he landed it, his gas was getting all he had to land. So he got her down on the ground, but this is how skilled they were. They knew that he had potential, needed more training, you see. So he made it. And that's the deal of the 5 of us in there, that I graduated as the first. And as I went through school, I became better and better. I became an excellent pilot. Then I was sent in the basic where we flew BT-13s, which is a very difficult airplane to fly, much more horsepower, goes farther, and so on. So what we did during World War II was we trained all of the British pilots to be pilots in World War II, see? And what we done, we kept the best pilots that we had trained and made them as instructors. They weren't happy about that at all. They wanted to go over and fly a fighter aircraft against Germany, you know.
Right.
And I got one of them. His name was Pilot Officer Maschieder, was his name. He was an excellent pilot. And so, but I was stationed down in Mississippi then, and it was a bad winter like we had this winter. And again, they had each instructor had 10 students, and they flew half a day with 5 of them, and the other 5, and then in the other half a day you went to ground school, learned other stuff. See?
Do you remember what was the name of the base?
Huh?
What was the base in Mississippi called?
Greenville, Mississippi. I forgot the name of the air base there, but it was a training base where we trained in BT-13s. Every one of these schools took 3 months, so it took you 9 months to go through the whole training period before you became an officer, say. So what happened is this guy was a damn gold brick, and he was so upset because he wanted to go back and fly fighters. Well, we all had that aim, say, to move ahead. What happened, we'd go out in the morning, where's Pilot Officer Maschieder? Oh, he can't come in today. And what happened is the weather got bad that I couldn't get my 20 hours in that he was required to give me, and the time ran out. And they knew that I was a good pilot, and they wanted to keep me going, and what they wanted to do is push me back to the next class. Well, when you're in there, it's like being in West Point. You get very close to the other people.
Right.
And so I says, "The hell with it," see. And I pulled out, and I had about 100 hours of training then. Now here's what happened. This guy was one of the finest pilots I ever rode with. As we got into the bigger airplanes, what you do then, you learn formation flying. You learn cross-country flying, you learn navigation everywhere, and so on. I had all this stuff in. I had My navigation was